From the very first moment Robyn Brown spoke to her daughter Aurora about independence, fans of Sister Wives felt the subtle but unmistakable tension. A woman should never make a man her financial plan. Stand on your own 2 feet. Protect yourself. Know your worth. It is advice that, stripped of context, could belong to any self-help manual or motivational seminar aimed at young women stepping into adulthood. On the surface, it appears thoughtful, calm, and reflective, the kind of guidance you hope a parent would offer. But for longtime viewers, a deeper, far more complex story immediately emerged. There was a pause, a collective tilt of the head from the audience, an unspoken question that hung in the air. How could Robyn, whose life had been so deeply intertwined with the financial and emotional support of others, preach independence while her own history tells a very different story? This was not mere hypocrisy. It was a contradiction that would become the lens through which every action and word of hers would be scrutinized, dissected, and analyzed. Before Robyn ever became part of the Brown family, her reality was one of struggle, of modest means, of working tirelessly to survive but never truly thrive. She entered the public eye as a divorced mother of 3, navigating the everyday challenges of providing for children with jobs that, while honest and respectable, offered little security: receptionist work, administrative roles, short-term coordinating positions. These were not careers that could build a financial foundation, not opportunities that could establish real independence. Bills piled up, credit card debt accumulated, and every dollar earned went toward covering immediate needs rather than building savings or long-term security. Robyn herself admitted that at times she didn't even have enough gas money to drive to meet Cody during their courtship, borrowing money to maintain a relationship, to participate in life events, to even be present. It was a form of dependence that cannot be understated. And yet, this is the very same woman who would later counsel her daughter against depending on a man financially. The irony was immediate, palpable, and, for many fans, impossible to ignore. The tension only intensified once Robyn entered the Brown family. At that point, her life did not simply merge into a larger household. Her independent existence evaporated entirely. The Brown family system was designed around a communal model. Income was pooled, expenses were shared, and resources were distributed according to need. In theory, the idea was simple: fairness, collective responsibility, and mutual support. In practice, however, the system shifted dramatically once Robyn joined. She arrived with approximately $30,000 in credit card debt that was immediately absorbed into the family finances. This was no minor inconvenience. The debt had tangible consequences, influencing family financial decisions, real estate purchases, and the distribution of resources. Before Robyn could meaningfully contribute, the family was already covering her past financial obligations. From day one, she became a net beneficiary, an imbalance that quietly set the stage for years of tension, resentment, and scrutiny from both viewers and the other wives. The story of Robyn's integration into the Brown family cannot be told without addressing the infamous nanny. Before Robyn arrived, the Brown household functioned as a highly coordinated network. Christine had raised dozens of children with the support of the family. Janelle and Mary balanced work, household duties, and child-rearing responsibilities. Teenagers pitched in. Every adult contributed to the survival and smooth functioning of the family unit. Yet Robyn, almost immediately upon joining the family, hired outside help, a nanny, funded entirely by the family resources. This was more than a simple personal choice. It was a signal of priority, privilege, and access. Fans immediately noticed the stark contrast. Christine did not have a nanny, Janelle did not have a nanny, Mary did not have a nanny. Robyn did, and the implications were clear. Her financial and emotional needs were elevated above those of the other wives, creating a subtle but undeniable hierarchy within the family. Independence, once again, was not measured in dollars earned, but in the control and access she commanded. Robyn's business ventures further illustrate this contradiction. Her project, My Sister Wife's Closet, was presented as a potential avenue for both personal and family income, yet it existed in a vacuum, insulated from consequence. Sales went unfulfilled, customer inquiries ignored. Yet Robyn faced no real-world repercussions because her lifestyle was supported by family resources. She was afforded the luxury of entrepreneurial experimentation without risk, a rare privilege in any business, but especially one meant to demonstrate independence. Here again, the contrast between advice and lived reality became evident. While Robyn could preach self-sufficiency and autonomy, her personal experience of independence was fundamentally mediated by external support systems, not achieved through her own unaided efforts. The honeymoon Robyn shared with Cody crystallized these dynamics. An 11-day retreat of luxury, financed not by Robyn's earnings but through family resources and the television series itself, symbolized a parallel existence. Her children were excluded, reinforcing the notion that she and Cody were operating within a separate sphere, a private world where access, comfort, and attention were allocated according to her priorities. This honeymoon was not merely a vacation, it was a declaration of influence, a demonstration of how she could position herself at the center of the family, enjoying privileges unavailable to the other wives. It also set the precedent for her ongoing prioritization of resources and attention, a theme that would define her years within the family. Central to Robyn's strategy was not only access to financial resources, but also control over relationships, particularly her relationship with Cody. She became his interpreter, the translator of his emotions, and the gatekeeper of his attention. Other wives, once accustomed to direct communication with Cody, now had to navigate through Robyn, who effectively controlled the flow of information, priorities, and decisions. Emotional labor, attention, and influence became commodities she could manage, and by consolidating control over these resources, Robyn crafted a form of power that extended far beyond simple financial dependence. Independence, in Robyn's case, was as much about relational control as it was about money, a reality that adds layers of complexity to the advice she gives to Aurora. The audience reaction to this duality was immediate and intense. Fans flooded social media with comments highlighting the dissonance between Robyn's message and her actions. While some were willing to interpret the advice as wisdom gained through personal challenges, most could not ignore the stark contrast between the life she preached about and the life she actually led. Her narrative of independence clashed with a history of managed privilege, strategic access, and careful positioning within a family system that had provided her with security, comfort, and influence far beyond her own unaided capabilities. The contradictions were not accidental. They were part of a pattern, a decades-long strategy of navigating systems, consolidating resources, and positioning herself at the center of influence. As part one of this story comes to a close, the tension is set, the stakes established, and the questions poised for deeper exploration. How did Robyn consolidate her position within the Brown family so effectively? How did she leverage her access, influence, and strategic positioning to maintain control over both Cody and the distribution of family resources? And how did this consolidation of power impact the other wives, the children, and the long-term dynamics of the family system? These questions will drive part 2, where the focus will shift from financial and material dependence to relational power, emotional strategy, and the subtle but undeniable methods Robyn used to become the central figure within the family hierarchy. Viewers will witness the consequences of her actions, the patterns of control, and the ways in which influence, access, and priority were orchestrated in ways that would leave the other wives and audiences alike both frustrated and fascinated. From the very moment Robyn Brown stepped into the Brown family, it was evident that her presence would alter the existing dynamics, but few could predict the extent of that transformation. What began as a cautious integration, expressing respect for the existing wives, acknowledging their roles, and presenting herself as humble, reflective, and considerate, soon evolved into a calculated, almost imperceptible shift of power. Robyn's ascent was not the result of overt confrontation, nor aggressive assertion, but a subtle, methodical accumulation of influence that would ripple through every facet of the family. Every decision she made, every interaction she had, was carefully calibrated to secure priority, access, and control. The Brown family, Once operating as a complex system of interdependent roles and responsibilities, gradually morphed into a hierarchy with Robyn at its center, and the consequences of this shift would become increasingly visible in the years to come. Central to Robyn's strategy was her relationship with Cody and the manner in which she positioned herself as the essential interpreter of his thoughts, emotions, and intentions. From the very early days, Robyn understood the value of influence over direct communication. She became the primary gatekeeper to Cody, a role that allowed her to manage both the flow of information and the allocation of attention. By interpreting Cody's intentions, framing conflicts in ways favorable to her, and controlling the narrative of disagreements, Robyn ensured that her priorities were consistently elevated. The other wives, once accustomed to direct access to Cody, were now required to navigate through her lens, a subtle, yet powerful restructuring of relational power. Emotional labor, attention, and decision-making were now resources that Robyn could manage and leverage, creating a dynamic where her influence was both protective and expansive. This influence extended far beyond simple communication. Robyn's control over Cody translated directly into preferential access to time, resources, and family decisions. She could command longer visits, allocate attention to her children, and secure privacy or luxury experiences that were out of reach for the other wives. The 11-day honeymoon she enjoyed with Cody is a stark example. Funded not by her personal income, but through family money and the financial mechanisms of the television series, it symbolized a private sphere within the family, a world in which she and Cody operated autonomously, free from the expectations and sacrifices imposed on the other wives. Her children were not included, signaling that this was a carefully curated environment designed to prioritize her needs and reinforce her centrality in the family structure. From a narrative perspective, it was the first unmistakable indication that Robyn's rise was not merely circumstantial, but strategically orchestrated. But the consolidation of power was not only about access and influence, it was also about perception. Robyn demonstrated an extraordinary ability to frame herself as the morally grounded, spiritually aligned, and often misunderstood figure within the family. This framing was crucial. It allowed her to deflect criticism, reframe conflicts, and position any challenge as an attack on her character or integrity. When disputes arose over preferential treatment, resource allocation, or perceived inequities, whether it was the nanny, financial decisions, or household privileges, Robyn consistently leveraged emotional narrative to protect her position. She became the one wronged, the one underappreciated, the one who needed comfort. In doing so, she effectively weaponized vulnerability as a tool of control. Fans of the series quickly recognized the pattern. Robyn's tears, her expressions of hurt, and her quiet indignation were not merely emotional reactions. They were strategic maneuvers that ensured loyalty, support, and deference from Cody, the family, and, crucially, the viewers. This combination of access, influence, and moral framing allowed Robyn to subtly redefine the family hierarchy. Decisions that were once communal began to shift into private negotiations between Robyn and Cody. Conversations about schedules, finances, and priorities increasingly occurred in the context of her unit with Cody rather than within the larger family system. By operating in this parallel space, she could secure privileges, direct resources, and shape outcomes without overtly challenging the family's purported commitment to equality and collective responsibility. Her actions were not confrontational, but the result was undeniable. She became the pivot around which the family's daily operations and long-term planning revolved. The implications for the other wives were profound. Christine, Janelle, and Mary found themselves navigating an increasingly complex web of rules and expectations, many of which they had not established. Their access to Cody, previously a given, became contingent on compliance, with norms that Robyn helped define. Their time, attention, and efforts were increasingly filtered through the expectations of this newly centralized system. Even when they attempted to assert autonomy or maintain prior routines, the gravitational pull of Robyn's influence made it difficult to operate on equal footing. The family structure, once celebrated as collaborative and communal, had quietly shifted into a hierarchy in which Robyn's needs and priorities consistently took precedence. Financial dependence, long a theme in the narrative surrounding Robyn, now intertwined with relational power. The resources she commanded, family funds, luxury experiences, and preferential treatment, were not merely incidental. They reinforced her position, creating a feedback loop where access to wealth, control over time, and influence over Cody collectively ensured that her centrality could not easily be challenged. This was particularly evident in the distribution of household support. While other wives contributed directly to daily operations, Robyn leveraged her position to receive both practical assistance and luxury privileges. Her children's needs were prioritized, her comfort ensured, and her ventures, such as My Sister Wife's Closet, existed without the pressures of accountability that would face any ordinary entrepreneur. The family system, designed to balance responsibility and resource allocation, had been recalibrated in her favor. Robyn's approach was also characterized by meticulous attention to emotional strategy. By positioning herself as morally correct and spiritually aligned, she created an environment in which her influence was both justified and self-sustaining. Criticism, rather than being an avenue for reflection, was reframed as evidence of misunderstanding or antagonism. Her ability to maintain this narrative ensured that loyalty from Cody, and often from the viewers, remained steadfast. The consequences were stark. The other wives, navigating an environment increasingly defined by Robyn's moral and emotional framework, found themselves marginalized. Their contributions, sacrifices, and voices, once integral to the family system, were now filtered, mediated, and, at times, subordinated to Robyn's priorities. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Robyn's rise was its subtlety. Her consolidation of power was not achieved through overt domination or confrontation, but through relational strategy, emotional framing, and the careful allocation of influence. She did not merely occupy a space within the family, she transformed the space, subtly redefining norms, expectations, and hierarchies in a manner that preserved the appearance of unity while simultaneously ensuring her centrality. Fans and critics alike have noted the elegance of this strategy. It is a model of influence and control that relies not on force, but on perception, loyalty, and the careful management of relational dynamics. As the seasons progressed, the consequences of Robyn's positioning became increasingly visible. Christine, long the backbone of the family, began to assert her independence, ultimately leaving the household. Janelle, whose contributions had been critical to the financial and operational stability of the family, also found herself navigating constraints imposed by Robyn's centrality. Mary, attempting to maintain her place within a shifting system, struggled to reconcile prior expectations with a new hierarchy. By the time recent seasons aired, the narrative was clear. Robyn, the newcomer, had not only survived but thrived in a structure she subtly reconfigured to serve her interests. The system, once communal and collaborative, had been transformed into one in which influence, access, and priority revolved around her. As Part 2 closes, the stage is set for a deeper exploration of consequences, both personal and structural. The relational strategies, emotional framing, and consolidation of power established in this chapter have far-reaching implications for family dynamics, the well-being of the children, and the integrity of the communal model. Part 3 will delve into the ultimate outcomes: the departure of the other wives, the ongoing privileged status of Robyn and her children, and the impact on Aurora and the next generation. The story is not merely one of financial dependence or relational influence. It is a study in human behavior, strategy, and the ways in which power can be consolidated quietly, effectively, and with enduring consequences. The culmination of Robyn Brown's journey within the Brown family is not merely a tale of personal success or dominance. It is a complex narrative of consequence, relational recalibration, and long-term impact that reverberates through every corner of the household, every decision made by Cody, and every future expectation for her children, including Aurora. By the time the family's evolving dynamics became fully visible on camera, the outcomes of Robyn's strategic positioning were undeniable. She was the last wife standing, a central figure whose comfort, influence, and authority were no longer contingent on communal negotiation but instead embedded into the very structure of the family. What began as careful observation, cautious integration, and deliberate influence had transformed into a system in which Robyn's priorities shaped daily life, resource allocation, and the emotional climate of the household. The other wives, whose sacrifices, contributions, and daily labor had historically supported the family, found themselves increasingly marginalized, their voices muted, and their roles redefined in relation to Robyn's centrality. Understanding these consequences requires a detailed examination of the interplay between personal strategy, emotional narrative, and structural shifts within the family, all of which contributed to a hierarchy that prioritized Robyn above all else. The first and perhaps most immediately visible consequence of Robyn's consolidation of influence was the departure of the other wives. Christine, whose dedication to child-rearing, family management, and emotional support had been foundational to the family's cohesion, ultimately made the decision to leave. This was not a sudden choice, but the culmination of years of observing the shifting priorities and emerging power structures within the household. The gradual centralization of Cody's attention toward Robyn, combined with the prioritization of her children's needs and her own comfort, created a dynamic in which Christine's contributions were no longer acknowledged or accommodated in equitable ways. Each interaction, from decision-making conversations to the allocation of family time, had begun to operate under a framework in which Robyn's perspectives and needs were preeminent, often framed as morally justified or spiritually aligned. Christine's departure, while undoubtedly influenced by multiple factors, can be directly traced to this structural recalibration. The system had been subtly reorganized to privilege Robyn, leaving less room for equal partnership, collaboration, or recognition of other wives' efforts. Janelle's experience followed a similar trajectory. Historically a key contributor to the family's financial and operational stability, Janelle had assumed roles that required significant personal investment, often sacrificing her own time and resources for the benefit of the collective. Yet, as Robyn's influence grew, Janelle's contributions were increasingly reframed or diminished in comparison. The emotional and relational shifts, particularly Robyn's ability to position herself as the moral and spiritual center of the family, created a situation in which Janelle's efforts were measured against a moving standard, one in which Robyn's needs and perceptions held disproportionate weight. Over time, this inequity, paired with the isolation of influence from Cody and the redistribution of family resources toward Robyn's priorities, created both frustration and exhaustion. Janelle's eventual exit, while deeply emotional for viewers, was a foreseeable outcome of a system recalibrated to elevate one member at the expense of others. Mary, navigating the evolving hierarchy, faced challenges of a slightly different nature. Her historical contributions had always been substantial, yet the shifting family dynamics required adaptation to a framework she had not established. Whereas previous roles relied on cooperative decision-making and a shared sense of accountability, the introduction of Robyn as a centralized gatekeeper altered expectations. Mary's access to Cody, her influence over family decisions, and even the recognition of her children's needs became contingent on her ability to operate within Robyn's preferred relational and moral framework. The cumulative effect of these changes produced strain, frustration, and moments of visible tension. Unlike Christine and Janelle, whose departures were dramatic markers of change, Mary's struggles were more subtle yet equally consequential. She was forced to navigate a hierarchy that had been quietly, yet firmly, established, requiring constant negotiation and adaptation in order to maintain relevance and access. At the heart of these consequences lies Robyn's strategic use of emotional and relational frameworks. By positioning herself as morally correct, spiritually aligned, and often wronged, she created a narrative that justified her centrality while deflecting criticism. Each instance of perceived preferential treatment, whether it was the allocation of financial resources, luxury experiences, or Cody's attention, was reframed as ethically justified or emotionally necessary. Her use of victimhood was not accidental. It was a consistent strategy to maintain influence. Every time other wives or viewers highlighted inequities, Robyn shifted the focus to her feelings, her intentions, or the perceived moral imperative of her actions. This consistent reframing ensured that her position remained unassailable and that loyalty and support flowed naturally from Cody, the family, and even the audience observing from the outside. Financial consequences are equally significant. Robyn's early life, characterized by financial instability, debt, and dependence, provides critical context for her later actions. Upon entering the Brown family, she integrated into a system where financial resources were communal, yet the distribution of these resources increasingly favored her priorities. Expenses such as the nanny, luxury trips, and debt repayment, coupled with the management of ventures like My Sister Wife's Closet, were subsidized by the family's collective wealth rather than her own independent income. This created a system in which her material comfort was insulated from risk, while other wives continued to contribute in more conventional ways. The disparity between Robyn's presented independence and her lived reality became a focal point for fans and critics, reinforcing the perception that her advice to Aurora, while superficially sound, was delivered from a position insulated by privilege and strategic positioning rather than lived experience. The emotional and psychological consequences of Robyn's positioning extend beyond material wealth. By controlling access to Cody, shaping family narratives, and strategically allocating emotional labor, Robyn effectively created a feedback loop of influence that reinforced her authority. The other wives' access to attention, support, and validation became mediated through her, creating relational dependence that mirrored, in some ways, the financial dependence she had previously been criticized for advocating against. While Robyn's message to Aurora emphasized self-sufficiency and independence, the operational reality of the family structure demonstrated an alternative paradigm. Influence and security were achieved through strategic relationships, emotional framing, and careful management of relational dynamics. This paradox between Robyn's advice and her lived experience is central to the reaction of viewers and the broader audience. The dissonance between theory and practice invites both intrigue and criticism. Fans are compelled to analyze, dissect, and debate the motivations, strategies, and consequences of Robyn's actions. Her life within the Brown family becomes a case study in influence, power dynamics, and strategic positioning, illustrating how authority can be accrued subtly yet effectively. Every action, from resource allocation to relational mediation, serves to reinforce her centrality, ensuring that the hierarchy she established remains durable, resilient, and difficult to challenge. Aurora's place in this complex system cannot be overlooked. The advice she receives from Robyn is framed as moral guidance, intended to prepare her for financial independence and relational self-sufficiency. Yet the broader context of Robyn's life suggests that the lessons are filtered through decades of strategic positioning and insulated privilege. Aurora's understanding of independence, resource management, and relational dynamics is therefore shaped not only by the content of the advice, but also by the context in which it is delivered. The implications for her future interactions, decisions, and expectations are profound. She is receiving guidance that is simultaneously authoritative, aspirational, and paradoxically detached from the practical realities of her mother's lived experience. As the narrative unfolds, the consequences of Robyn's consolidation of power are increasingly evident. The family's original model of collective responsibility and equitable resource sharing has been transformed into a hierarchy that privileges one member. Emotional labor, attention, and decision-making power are concentrated, and the other wives, despite their historical contributions and sacrifices, are repositioned within a system that is no longer designed for balance, but for the preservation of one central figure's priorities. The resulting dynamic is both fascinating and troubling. It demonstrates the efficacy of subtle, strategic influence while also highlighting the ethical and relational tensions that arise when one member's needs consistently supersede collective norms. Fans of the series have long recognized these patterns, and the reactions are complex. On one hand, there is admiration for the strategic acumen, emotional intelligence, and relational insight that Robyn has demonstrated over the years. On the other hand, there is frustration, disbelief, and critique regarding the inequities, preferential treatment, and moral contradictions that her actions reveal. Her advice to Aurora, therefore, becomes a lightning rod for discussion, It is not merely a personal recommendation, but a lens through which the audience examines the interplay between narrative, influence, and real-world outcomes. The dissonance between message and messenger invites scrutiny, debate, and deep engagement, illustrating the enduring appeal of Robyn as both a compelling character and a subject of analysis. In conclusion, the consequences of Robyn Brown's strategic positioning within the Brown family are manifold. The departures of Christine and Janelle, the ongoing challenges faced by Mary, the consolidation of influence over Cody, the preferential allocation of resources, and the framing of emotional narratives all contribute to a system in which Robyn occupies a central, unassailable position. This hierarchy, while subtle in its formation, has reshaped family dynamics, redefined relational norms, and created a legacy that will influence both her immediate household and the perceptions of viewers for years to come. Her advice to Aurora, though superficially sound, is inseparable from this context, highlighting the complex interplay between theory, practice, and lived experience. Fans observing the unfolding story are compelled to navigate the tension between admiration and critique, fascination and skepticism, as Robyn's journey continues to exemplify the ways in which influence, strategy, and relational dynamics intersect in powerful, enduring ways. As this analysis draws to a close, the narrative remains open-ended. The lessons for Aurora, the implications for the next generation, and the ongoing scrutiny of Robyn's strategies ensure that the story is far from complete. The interplay of power, emotional framing, financial influence, and relational control will continue to shape the Brown family, offering insights not only into the mechanics of plural marriage, but into the broader dynamics of human behavior, strategy, and hierarchy. For viewers, the story serves as both cautionary tale and compelling drama, a demonstration of how carefully managed influence can redefine a system and how the consequences of strategic positioning resonate far beyond the immediate moment. The final takeaway is clear. In the world of the Brown family, as in life, access, influence, and perception are resources as valuable, if not more so, than wealth itself, and those who master their management shape the course of everyone around them. Sister Wives, Robyn Brown, the untold story of power, influence, and contradiction. Robyn Brown's advice to her daughter Aurora: don't rely on a man financially, stand on your own. Sounds inspiring on the surface. But when you peel back the layers, the story behind the words is far more complicated, far more dramatic, and far more revealing about the woman giving the guidance. From the very beginning, Robyn's journey in the Brown family has been a masterclass in strategy, influence, and careful positioning. She arrived as a single mother struggling with debt and modest jobs, yet over time, she transformed her position, consolidating control over Cody, her children, and family resources, while simultaneously crafting an image of independence and moral authority. The first part of this saga uncovers the contradictions between Robyn's advice and her lived reality. Viewers saw her preach self-sufficiency, while her comfort and security were built on the labor, sacrifice, and wealth of others. Her entry into the family brought her debt, but that debt was absorbed into the communal family finances. Luxury experiences like the 11-day honeymoon, the nanny, and business ventures were funded by the family system, not her independent earnings. The advice that seems straightforward and empowering becomes entangled in layers of influence, privilege, and relational strategy, revealing that Robyn's independence was, in reality, carefully curated access to resources and control. Part 2 explores how Robyn's influence reshaped the family dynamics entirely. By positioning herself as morally correct, spiritually grounded, and often wronged, she used emotional framing to secure Cody's attention and prioritize her own needs. Every other wife had to navigate the shifting hierarchy she engineered, while Robyn maintained access, authority, and comfort. Her strategies were subtle yet unmistakable. Control over communication, preferential treatment, and the use of victimhood as leverage allowed her to consolidate her power without overt confrontation. What appeared on the surface as harmonious plural marriage began to reveal cracks, tensions, and long-term consequences, with Robyn at the center of a system increasingly designed to benefit her. And the final part, the consequences of this consolidation become starkly visible. Christine and Janelle departed. Mary struggled to maintain influence, and Robyn emerged as the last wife standing, her authority and access unchallenged. The hierarchy she created ensured her children, her comfort, and her priorities dominated family life. The lessons to Aurora, while superficially sound, exist within a context defined by strategic influence, emotional narrative control, and selective prioritization. Robyn's journey is a paradox. She teaches independence while her life demonstrates the power of relational strategy and managed access. For fans, it is simultaneously captivating, frustrating, and instructive, a story of influence, morality, and the undeniable human desire to shape one's world. Ultimately, this story is more than just about money, marriage, or advice. It is a window into power, control, and the subtle art of managing relationships to secure not just survival, but dominance. Robyn Brown's legacy is complicated, dramatic, and utterly compelling. A reminder that in families, influence is as valuable as wealth, and that the lessons of life are often inseparable from the lives of those who teach them.